Okay, hello. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. It is the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. My name is Heather Grant. I am one of the community admins in the maintenance community by Upkeep. Thank you everyone for joining us today. If you are not already a member of the maintenance community on Slack, we would love to have you join us. I will be sure to add the link on how to sign up in the chat in just a moment. Today, we have Joel Levitt joining us for a presentation on the misuse of KPIs and how to course correct. I am looking forward to learning a lot with Joel. The recording from the session today will be available in the maintenance community tomorrow, along with a copy of the slides that you see here. Joel himself is also available to answer any questions live in the Slack group. So feel free to share the recording of this webinar or the invitation to Slack directly with friends or colleagues, anyone who you know who would benefit from hearing some of Joel's expertise. Final piece of housekeeping, and then we will go ahead and get started. You'll notice that your cameras and microphones are not turned on today. So what you'll want to do if you have any questions for Joel, or if you want to answer any questions that he may pose to the audience, you can use that chat feature on the right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to pop in there, say hello, let us know where you're joining from as well. Go ahead and chat your questions as they come up throughout the presentation, and we'll do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of our time today. If we don't get to any questions in there, we will be sure to answer them offline in the community as well. That is all from me. Thank you again to Joel and everyone for joining us. Joel, I'll hand it over to you to get started.
Well, Heather, I noticed that when you counted me in, that it was kind of insulting to say, check your hair.
The automated system.
So I'm just going to be like a little bit huffy about that.
I'll send Livestorm the feedback for sure.
Oh, don't worry about it. It was a good. It said to smile. All you guys that have run Zooms, sometimes they catch you in an unusual position or expression or something. So I thought that was funny to have it built in, that it reminds you to, to quote the Dalai Lama to get started. He was meeting with Desmond Tutu, and they spent a lot of time joking around behind the stage. And the Dalai Lama said, Desmond, act like a holy man. The cameras are on us. So it even happens to the best people in the world. So let me see. Let me get this. Okay, that seems like a half of a screen. Is that correct, or is that the whole screen? Oh, there we go. So my name is Joel Levitt. I've been around this stuff for a really long time. I remember card-based CMMSs, if you can believe that. I love to write, so you can see some of the titles of the books I've written. And I also like to travel to interesting places, so I've given courses in 39 countries, IRL, in real life. God knows how many virtually. So we're going to talk about key performance indicators. I have two things that I want to do in this. This is just a short talk about them. One is I want to do a little bit of training in the second part of this talk, a little bit of training about KPIs. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about how we, misuse KPIs, how they're dangerous, and they become ineffective if they're not looked at in a careful way. So the first thing is the KPIs, key performance indicators, are measures of long-term performance. And the key part of performance indicators, key performance indicators, the key means things that are essential for the survival of the business. And to say it really straight, it's not to bullshit management about how great of a job you're doing. That's a misuse of the KPI. And you have performance indicators, and the key performance indicators are the most critical ones. I believe that we, as much of us by consultants, wildly overuse the phrase KPI. And in one company, they had a wall of KPIs, of beautiful color charts of different things. And, you can manage 2, 3, maybe 4 KPIs, maybe 50 performance indicators that you would look at for certain things, but only a few KPIs. So if you have a lot of KPIs, you don't have a lot of KPIs. You have a lot of performance indicators. And the design of this is to get people into action, keep them in action, and make them go the right direction. That's what the KPIs are for. Now, there's something really interesting, and this is a lot of words. I don't usually like this, but these are little stories, and I'll tell you the stories. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. That's what's called Goodhart's law. So there's tons of stories when you read about Goodhart's law. You find, hundreds of stories about this. The one I liked was when British ruled India, the most dangerous snake in India, of course, was a cobra. And they wanted to reduce the population, so they put a bounty on cobras. And what the Indian people did was they started to raise cobras so that they could kill them and turn them in for the bounty. And I just thought that is so human to work the problem and come up with the most advantageous solution, but it doesn't get to the root of the problem of the snakes. The second one, back in the old Soviet days, they ordered their nail factories to increase production. So the managers, reacted by producing millions of tiny little useless nails. And then the planners wised up and switched to a weight measure, and the factory started making giant, heavy, equally useless nails. So again, they were trying to get more good nail production, and what they did was people changed the mix of their products. And this is recently, we've been reading a lot about colleges and how they manipulate the data. And U.S. News and World Report, if you have a kid that's going to college, they have rankings. So since the number of applications figures into the rankings, some colleges used every even postcard or request for information and called it an application to raise the number of applications. They also, high rejection rates is considered prestigious. So some colleges rejected applicants for the fall only to admit them in the spring. So these are cases where the measure is trying to measure something real in the world. But humans are really smart, so they, what I call game the number to make themselves look good. And I have to ask you, who hasn't? If you're responsible for shutdowns, who hasn't swept some routine work into the shutdown to clean up their backlog, to improve the maintenance budget? So, that's a really common thing that we try to protect against, because doing work during a shutdown is generally absolutely more expensive. Declaring a shutdown complete, but actually finishing the work on the routine budget. So this is where the project budget looks good, but the routine budget gets hit for stuff that should have been in the project. So again, this is to make somebody look good, the project look good. skipping some steps in a PM to get it done so we can improve our PM compliance. Remember, PM compliance is important for reliability, but PM compliance that's pencil whipped or PM compliance that's faked doesn't really help our reliability. And then probably the most common game of all, and it's played at a pretty high level in some companies, is looking at maintenance costs and capitalizing some of them, or looking at capital costs and making them maintenance costs, because that directly impacts the profit of the company. In some cases, we want to, increase profits, so we take all our maintenance costs and capitalize them. Again, these are games. These defeat the good purpose of a KPI. Now, KPI misuse may start small. They're not bad. This is really confusing for some people, because the KPI itself is a great measure of something that's in the real world. So, GE was a good example of this. During Jack Welch's reign, 81 to 93, this is a company that went from a value of $12 billion in 81 to $280 billion in 93. And he attributes it to the really, really rigorous use of KPIs to evaluate divisions, to evaluate people, and to determine who's ready to move up the food chain. So, but that was a good idea that decayed into an exercise in deception. So by the 2000s, if you wanted a good career, you had better show good KPIs. By 2008, when we had the financial crisis and GE Financial got into trouble, GE Aviation was crediting percentages of long-term contracts to this year's business to increase the revenue and the profits. This became really bad. And they were taking like a 25-year service contract on a turbine and making it revenue in year one. So that's kind of kicking the problem down the road, kicking the can down the road a bit. It falsifies the actual financial situation of the subsidiary. They got caught. It became a huge problem. The measure became a target that was divorced from the reality it was supposed to be measuring. And this is where this misuse really, really lives. It's human nature. I mean, almost anybody would screw with a metric that made your group look good, or yourself look good. Like if you could make your age lower without actually doing it, or your weight lower, or your blood look better, a lot of people would do that. But the problem is that you miss the vital information contained in the true results. So if you have, a weight, and you play games with the weight, so it looks like it's lower, but it's not, you may be ignoring real critical information for your health by, messing around with the results. True metrics also tell you how bad the situation is and when the situation is starting to get better. So like in the GE case, they didn't know how bad the situation was because everybody throughout the company was gaming the numbers. That was just what was done. It wasn't like, it wasn't like a standard deviation out. It was the way business was done there after the KPIs, stopped being really rigorously tied to results. So what we do about this, the first thing is to, get away from fixed changeless rules that can be easily gamed. If leadership in the maintenance department is aware that numbers are being gamed, they need to get into it and clean it up. The second thing is we're trying to measure something that's really in the world. So we want to make sure the measure is we're measuring the real thing and not a rough proxy, which may be easy to game. Try using multiple criteria for looking at something, because that makes it more harder to game. And then the first step is to be aware, like make sure people know that this can happen, and we want to challenge ourselves and we want to challenge each other to keep it honest. And, then Charles Goodhart got to, contribute to our situation. I also want to give you some little information about KPIs, particularly leading and lagging indicators, understanding the story, and the granddaddy of the manufacturing metrics. Also, we'll look at some, not an exhaustive look at it, but some measures, and we could call them performance indicators, that I use to help understand what's going on. And I can use one or two numbers and understand pretty completely, pretty quickly. So it's efficient. Now, this is a really, really important distinction. And I have to say that it took me years before I understood what they were talking about. So lagging indicators are indicators where we're measuring something that already happened. So how many work orders did we process last week? That's a number. It already happened. It's a lagging indicator. The indicator gets published after the number has been determined. Almost all indicators are lagging when they're used that way. So lagging indicators are usually not that great when they're used like just reporting the facts. But if you use your creativity and your knowledge, those lagging indicators can become leading indicators. Now, leading indicators help influence the lagging indicator in the next period. So, for example, if I'm concerned about downtime, I have a lagging indicator called downtime that gets read out every week or every month, and we had 1.2717%, whatever, downtime. That doesn't give you an opening for action. But if we would start to look at PM compliance, we might find that leads or pushes downtime down, reduces downtime as PM compliance goes up. So that's like cool. If we know PM's compliance is problematic, we can, have our meetings and, have discussions and make sure people are doing the PMs and put that compliance back up if it leads to, lower downtime. Another one, CM, corrective maintenance. Now, my personal definition of corrective maintenance is work that's found by a PM inspection and repairable before failure. So once something fails, it's no longer corrective action in my world. A lot of people have different definitions of that, but for me, a corrective action, we do a PM inspection, we do a predictive maintenance inspection, we do an IIoT sensor inspection. I don't care what kind of inspection. And we find a defect, damage, or deterioration. We put in a work order, we plan, schedule, execute, and that goes away. So it could be that CM compliance might lead to reduced breakdowns, because remember what a CM is. A CM is deterioration, damage, or a defect that's found before failure. So if we fix it, we're going to reduce the number of breakdowns. And then, a simple one might be training hours might lead rework. There's a lot of reasons for rework. Rework is when an asset comes back to maintenance in a short period of time due to a defect in the job that was done or the part or something. Like in a truck fleet, we always considered 3,000 miles to be the amount of time when it would be considered rework. If the brakes were worked on and it came back within 3,000 miles, it was considered rework. So it could be that training hours may drive rework. So that's another easy thing. That's an opening for action. Rework is it's very complicated, but training is something that you can easily impact. So that's the leading and lagging indicators. Now, this is interesting. The same indicator can be both leading and lagging. So it's easy to do this. I'm in a conversation with my doctors about my girth, right? So what happens is he says I should lose weight and reduce my body mass index right here. So weight and BMI, because that will lead to better health consequences. So weight and BMI is a leading indicator for health. So if I want to improve my health, I have to impact this. But as a lagging indicator, weight is not easily actionable. So I have another indicator called calories and activity, and that is a leading indicator of weight. So I manage my calories and activity, which is, there's an opening for action there, which leads to my weight hopefully going down and my BMI going down. And then that leads to an improvement in my health and, being able to do stuff and things like that. So that's how all this is organized. And where creativity comes in is that we want to, sometimes a weird little indicator will leverage a big indicator, and that's the ideal situation. If we can find out what's really causing the problem, we can use the KPIs to improve the stuff in the real world. Now, performance indicators are always trying to tell a story, and it is so useful to learn the story of the indicator. Like, a lot of people look at the numbers, and I think that gives you a certain amount of power. I personally have never been moved by numbers. I've always been moved by stories. The story wants to be easy to understand and accept, and the story may create that opening for action I keep talking about. And we're always looking for something that's a long-term goodness rather than a short-term, because what some of the gaming of the KPIs has to do with trading a short-term spike for a long-term problem. So we're making the short-term numbers look good at the expense of the long-term, quality of life. Now, the granddaddy KPI is maintenance cost per unit of output. So it depends. I was working in a potato plant, big potato, like they made French fries. Now, man, they made 1.5 million pounds of French fries a day. That was a serious French fry operation. And this company had 11 or 12 plants the same size. So they were making like 15 million pounds a day. And apparently they were like 20, 30, 40% of the marketplace for French fries in the fast food industry. So this was a serious amount of French fries. And I started to ask the engineer I was working with, the cost of per French fry and he said 5 cents. And I said, 5 cents what? He said, 5 cents per pound. So, and it was a number that everybody knew. Like everybody on the floor knew. It was widely reported. So this is one of the things I encourage you to do. This is a KPI. If you're a manufacturer, tons of steel. What's the cost of maintenance per ton or ounce of gold or soda, beer, detergent? Even if you're making highway miles, you're building a highway, maintenance cost per mile. And the way this is effective is everybody in every role in the organization is familiar with this number because, everybody contributes a little bit to this number. Some people, like the purchasing agent, contributes a lot to the number. Maybe the utilities a lot to the number, but everybody contributes something. So we want to know, like in the case of a Coca-Cola bottler, they had charts up that showed the cost for the bottles, the cost for the sugar and the filling, and the cost for the case, and the cost for the route distribution. All that stuff was listed out so they could build the case, cost per case, really, really effectively. And it made it very transparent of where the money went. Now, this is a CMMS labor integrity. Now, one of the problems that we have with CMMS systems, all kinds of systems, is how much of the work that's done gets into the system. In other words, what this does is it's the earned rate over the burn rate. So what we're doing is we take the work order hours for some period and we divide them by the hours we paid for that period, the payroll hours. And whatever that number is, that's where we start. And we really want to get to the point where the work order hours and the payroll hours are very close and they track like in step. When that starts to happen, then we know that there's high system integrity. In one international airport, I ran that report and it was 29%. So what we're saying is 29% of the hours that they paid for found its way into the CMMS. So that's kind of a problem. And it means that you can't count on anything that comes out of the CMMS because the integrity of the data going in is not there. So I like to do this and look at it for a while, get it to a decent level, and then look at it infrequently. You don't have to manage it every day. You can manage it, once a quarter. And that would still work. There's another use for this. It's the same calculation, but it has to do with shutdowns. Now, when you have a big shutdown, usually the labor starts off low, and then as stuff gets ready to go, starts to climb quickly, and then starts to tail off. It's called an S curve. So you can almost tell if a shutdown's in trouble by seeing whether or not that labor follows the S curve you think it should. So one way to look at this is when people clock into a shutdown, that's the burn rate. Okay, so that's the rate at which you're paying money out. And then as jobs get completed in the shutdown, that becomes the earn rate. So as hours are put into work orders, that's the earn rate. And that ratio tells you how effective the labor is and can detect problems in the S curve before they're insurmountable. So at some point, you can't fix them. You have to delay the duration or cut back the scope of work. But early on, you could actually fix it. So that's the labor integrity metric. And I'm saying this is a PI, performance indicator, not a KPI, in that we manage it until it's okay, and then we don't manage it anymore. Now, the single easiest way to tell if a maintenance department is under control is by looking at the ratio of the kind of work they do. Now, the problem with this is that a lot of people define these, emergency maintenance, PM maintenance, and CM maintenance. They don't define them accurately. So the number is a total sham. What we want to do is the PM number should come only from work on task lists that are generated by the PM module. So that's the one number, the PM number, strictly hours actually performing PM task list work. Now, the PM task list work will throw off corrective maintenance because as we inspect, we find problems, and that is a corrective maintenance problem. So we then have work orders or even part of the PM work order as corrective maintenance. If the PM guy does the corrective maintenance right then and there, which is pretty common in some industries, in the transportation industry, typically if you find a problem with a truck, you fix it right then and there. In factories, it's sometimes they're bigger jobs, so they can't be done, or you need parts or something. But corrective maintenance is the result of properly done PM inspections of various kinds. So, if certain things are not moving in proportion to each other, then you know that there's no linkage within the PM system. For example, a lot of places I go just have PM and emergency work. They don't have any CM at all because they don't catalog CM as CM. They catalog it as either emergency work or PM work. So then we have no evidence that a PM system is in place. Well, let's say if PM goes up, like a boss says, let's do more PM, and the PM system goes up, and let's say CM goes down, that would make me really suspicious because either they're pencil whipping it, they don't know what they're looking at, like not competent, or they're looking at the wrong stuff. So you could do more PM, but it's not buying anything if you're not getting CMs out. And, PM compliance that we talked about earlier doesn't tell you if the PM system is working. It just tells you that it's being done. This metric with the ratio of emergency, CM, and PM, and maybe some project work or improvement work, that tells you if maintenance is working, if the PM is actually working. So that's something to really think about. And I see that I ask that question right when I get to a place. I ask them about those ratios. And you can tell when they're not related to anything. And you can tell when they're, yeah, this is legitimate. Even if the emergency work is too high, it's still a legitimate observation. So a lot of times we misunderstand what to do with the KPIs or the PIs. Like, what do you do with the breakdown report? It has a description of what happened. If you're lucky, there'll be a Pareto chart that'll sort out the most common one, the second most common one, third, and stuff like that. And my observation is that companies then go into a follow-up blame storming session where everybody is blaming the other group. Oh, it's operators. Oh, it's maintenance. Oh, it's materials. And none of that is really going to be useful. So we want to look at this report. We want to Pareto it. And then we want to start to solve the problems independent of where it happens. Remember, at that point, the adverse event already happened. So we use the breakdown report to inform our root cause analysis efforts, particularly on reoccurring issues. Now, there was kind of a funny situation. Getting back to the metric of CMMS integrity, one of the things that we found was that maintenance people are frequently used as general purpose employees because some of the old time general purpose employees have been leaned out of the system. So there's really nobody left to do things like move boxes, set up special events, all that kind of stuff. So it falls to the maintenance department, which I have no problem with. I am completely in favor of using the maintenance department for stuff like that. And I mean, there is a limit. There is a limit. In one manufacturing company, I could not find one of the maintenance crews, and they were facilities maintenance crew. And literally, I couldn't find them. And when I was, asking everybody, what was happening was this is a private company, and the owner of the company was having work done on their house. Now, this is probably from an IRS point of view illegal, but the point was, from a maintenance point of view, I have no problem with personal service like that. The problem I had was that there was no work order to represent the work. So my thing is, if you have people that are doing non-maintenance work on maintenance time, they need to open a work order so that they can charge it correctly. And, this could be temporary assignments, in automobile plant. There was an assignment. This would be the most fun assignment I could imagine in maintenance. They took a couple maintenance guys and they bought the competitors' cars. And the maintenance guys disassembled the car into individual parts and glued the parts to displays so that they could see exactly how many parts went into this part of the car versus that. I mean, how much more fun can you have than that in maintenance, taking apart a new car? And that was, it took a long time to take apart a car down to its fasteners. So we need to, whenever there's any kind of assignment where somebody is not available for maintenance, we need to create a work order and have codes made that will tell us what happened. Now, in some systems, you need to make like an asset, a fake asset that you can charge time to. So you could have, an asset for setting up events, Christmas decorations, all hands meetings, all that kind of stuff. That would be something that you do a couple times a year. Whatever the hours are, it's recorded. The thing that's important about this is it's really nice to know that a lot of your maintenance labor is not going to maintenance. So if there's complaints about maintenance and you're also being asked to supply people for other things, then that is a natural friction point that is open for discussion. The second thing is, we had maintenance places where the maintenance guys were taking people to the airport, picking people up at the airport, picking up drawings, doing a whole bunch of miscellaneous stuff. And it could have turned out that a rideshare relationship might have been more advantageous than using a maintenance person. So we have lots of projects in maintenance, and these are projects that are not maintenance. They're really productivity improvement or safety improvement. So they need to be cataloged to that. So that's just one that's interesting. In some places, particularly a new plant, when they set up one of the transmission plants in Ohio, half of the maintenance work was project work for the first year or two, because they were getting all the tooling squared away and maintenance guys were doing that stuff. So that's what we did. So I'm just saying, record every, if somebody's sick, I'd like to have that on a work order. I'd like to have everything on a work order. If they're in training, they're on a training work order, because then the work order hours and the payroll hours will be really close. And if that's the case, then I know that I'm capturing stuff in the CMMS, and that gives me verification of the integrity of the data. Okay. So good KPIs and PIs act like weather vanes. They're like compasses. They help you and your team understanding if you're going the right direction towards whatever your strategic goals are. So we want to pick things that are crucial to achieving our goals, crucial to achieving the goals, well-defined, well-understood, quantifiable. And when I say well-understood, I want everybody to know how this thing is calculated. Because if only a few people know how it's calculated, then it'll be very easy to game the number and come up with false things that make you look good. And it should be well communicated. In other words, the KPIs, the really critical stuff, should be reviewed with all hands. Maybe in a toolbox meeting once a month, there's the KPI numbers, a little discussion on it, and that would be how I'd handle that. Okay, so by the way, good luck with this stuff. And I want to put a plug in for my latest graphic novel called The Battle for Reliability on Amazon. And thank you very much for listening. And Heather, it's all yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know that KPIs and metrics tracking on teams can certainly be a challenging endeavor. So any and all information, I'm sure, is super, super helpful for our audience here. We did have a couple of questions come in throughout the presentation, so I'll run through those now if that's all right with you, Joel. And then any other questions from the audience, please feel free to continue to add in the chat. And again, we'll get through as many as we can in the next few minutes here.
Okay.
Awesome. So a couple of questions in that I have. One of them is, Joel, shouldn't we focus on outcome KPIs instead of just on process KPIs like PM completion? The latter is like school attendance, while the former is analogous to grades achieved by tests and exams. Perfect attendance does not guarantee good grades. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't even know if I've ever thought about that before. So Say the first part again.
Yeah, definitely. So it says, Joel, shouldn't we focus on outcome KPIs instead of just on process KPIs like PM completion?
Okay, so outcome KPIs versus process KPIs. It depends on what the team is trying to do. If we're trying to get a PM system up and running, we're going to need to manage the process KPIs because that's really what we're doing right then. In general, this is something that I'm sure there's a body of knowledge on this. I'm not aware of it, so I wouldn't want to say much more than that.
Awesome. Another question here that says, Joel, how can you ensure work order hours are accurately entered since they are self-reported with independent corroboration? Should we measure the amount of services produced instead of hours spent? Almost looks like we're rewarding slower workers than over faster workers.
This is, if I go back in time to, I don't know, Heather, maybe 10 years before you were born, something like that. This was always the challenge of the CMMS. Every CMMS has had this problem, and various companies have managed it various different ways. Sometimes a supervisor will have a look-see at the hours and see if they make sense. Sometimes the computer itself will do some editing, and if there's a wide variance between the hours it should have been and the hours it was, it'll alert that and somebody will look at that. It's really like an issue. But I want to just point out a group of people that we all have had exposure to, and that is the group of people who fix our cars at car dealerships. If you ever notice, their work orders are actually in minutes. So they'll put in the time start, time finished, and then calculate the minutes. And my guess is that that's pretty accurate because that's like a jugular issue, if you will, for that business, is to make sure they get paid for every minute. I don't see any reason why we can't get better at that. Now, one of the things you guys are doing and others is you're going to mobile solutions for work orders. There, you can't help but when you open the work order, it starts timing it. When you close it, it closes off the time. So all those kinds of things I think are really, really good to get that problem. But I'm going to tell you, this is a place where people can hide in the bathroom and they can, go out for I've seen everything, so that's, I think I answered that question.
I think so too. Matthew, I think, just asked a follow-up question that says, we strive for over 90% of time worked inputted, but as spoke of, once the measure becomes the target, it becomes polluted. How do we drive compliance without polluting the data?
Well, this is what I was talking about. First, you realize that everybody has conversations about that there is or isn't pollution in the data. First, you have to realize that because you're measuring it so intensively, there's going to be a tendency to make sure that if the estimate says 8 hours, mine says 8 hours, and I'm all real good. And certainly you're going to have to do some spot checking. Supervisors have to be, alert for, if a guy does his or her work orders at the end of the day, they go back to their thing. We know that they're not going to put the accurate hours for each job. It'll always add up to 8 hours. 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, 2 hours, without regard for what it was. So that's why we want to see people filling out their work orders on the fly. That's why, again, the mobile solutions are helpful. And we want to be serious about it. I mean, was this Matthew, Heather, that said this?
Yeah.
So I would have to ask Matthew to follow up with his payroll department and ask how many hours a month do they estimate is being stolen from the company through falsification of payroll records. And I would be surprised if they admitted to any, right? Because that's an area of focus for the company, and the company is serious about that data. I don't know anybody that ever got fired for putting down a different number on a work order than they actually worked. So we have to get serious about it if we want it to be serious.
Yeah, it seems to me there could be an element of culture involved as well, in terms of, you know, breeding honesty within your team and making sure that the process is understood correctly of how to kind of go about entering this information and what counts and what doesn't count as work time, things like that.
Yeah, and even a good definition between when you start a work order and when you end the work order. You know, in some places, I end the job and I go back to the shop, and I'm not on a work order until I get the next work order. But that's not how it should be. You know, all that should be put into the work order.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have another question from Ravi, kind of along the similar vein. It reads, "It's difficult not to cook your numbers to reflect in your favor, especially when bonuses depend on it. I want to maintain my integrity. I see the benefits of true numbers and have the company benefit in the long run, but the culture effectively prevents this. How do you think this should be handled?"
Well, I would say, you know, cook the numbers moderately. You know, like, what is it? Bulls get slaughtered, pigs get slaughtered. No. Anyway, I forgot the metaphor, but you know, if you want to really have good numbers, you're going to just have to have good numbers. And you know, where there's an incentive program, it really makes it hard for everybody to do the right thing. And you know, it's like killing cobras. You know, if you start paying me to kill cobras, I'm going to have to find a bunch of cobras to kill. You know, and that's going to then skew the number.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question here from, excuse me if I mispronounce this name, Masanvi. Masanvi's wondering, "I'm working for a subcontractor. We use the CMMS of the customer to measure our performance, but I want to know, maybe should we have our own KPI to know really the performance of our staff?"
This is an interesting problem. A lot of companies where they use contractors require that the contractor use the main CMMS for all their reporting and jobs. And I personally agree with that, since the owner is paying for the job, they should get the data. So, you know, the question is, what do you want to measure, and why can't you do it with the system that's there? It could be with a little bit of work. Somebody could come up with some reports that exclude other data and just, you know, report on your subgroup. So I would look for that. I was really, really miffed when some subcontractors would not use the main system. So then I couldn't figure out what it cost to manage an area, because, you know, there was no way to know from what they were doing.
Awesome. Well, I hope that helps answer your question. And I'm actually not seeing any more new questions. We have some good conversation going on, people providing input on some of the questions and answers as well. So Joel, if you haven't had a chance, that would be really interesting to go through. All of the other participants as well, feel free to kind of read through that and share your thoughts too. But I think that'll bring us just to the end of our time together today. Again, if you want to watch this replay, it'll be available in the Slack community tomorrow, as well as these slides. I appreciate everyone's time, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see you all next time.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Joel. Bye.